Hey guys, it is Leah with the Old Settlers Homestead. I had a quiet moment, and it's been almost a week and a half since I posted our last video, which was an Open Mouth Monday. And I was just answering, or speaking with a viewer on an email they sent me. And I thought, you know what, actually this is kind of a good time. It's quiet in here, the kids are outside, Ron and RJ are off doing a few errands. And I thought maybe I would address this question or this email with a video because I think it's worthy of that. I think that for anybody considering going into hardcore, and I'm going to call it hardcore homesteading, and I'm talking off-grid hardcore. I'm not talking, and it's not to demean anybody. It's not to belittle anybody's efforts, because anything you do that's outside of the norm is a lot of work. Anything that you do outside of society, if you're gardening, if you're making things from scratch in your home for your food, it's hard. You know, that's hard work. So this isn't to demean. This is simply saying that because we know that homesteaders watch this channel, and we know there's all types of different homestead channels. There's homesteaders that are on grid, and there's homesteaders that are off grid, and partially, and there's homesteaders that are off grid that are on like full solar or full generator, full wind power, etc. And there's homesteaders that are off grid that have all their amenities. Maybe they have their running water, and maybe they have their septic, etc. And they can run their washing machine, and they can run their vacuum, and they can do all these great things. But for somebody that's going off grid, that is going to just cut the wires, as we say, we'll say cut the umbilical cord from the grid, and they are going to have to figure out their laundry situation. They're going to have to figure out their dish situation. They're going to have to figure out how to keep their family clean situation. That can be a real shocker. And most people don't realize it because they've never experienced it. It's kind of like counseling somebody who has been in debt if you've never been in debt, or counseling somebody who doesn't have enough money to make it from week to week if you've always had enough money to make it from week to week. Ron and I always use the comparison of people that are marriage counselors that's never been married, or people that are counselors to parents that have never had children. You can have all the schooling in the world or all the knowledge in the world, but unless you've experienced it, unless you've really gone in and said, okay, you know, I've lived this life, you really have no idea. And that's not to be, that's not to be derogatory or to belittle anybody. That's just to be honest. I mean, it's to be honest. I'm 50, Ron's going to be 59 this year. We've lived a lot. We've lived a lot of life, especially in this generation, because we haven't stayed within those confined walls. So we have, I don't want to use the word wisdom because then that would be giving us credit, but we have a lot of life experiences that we can say, you know what, we understand that if we haven't experienced something, we really aren't learned enough to give anybody advice on. We can give our opinion, but we can't give you advice on it because we haven't experienced it. And it's the same with homesteading. If you've homesteaded but you haven't homesteaded off grid, you have no clue. And for those that are considering off-grid homesteading, you have to understand something very, very clearly, that it's not just a matter of physical labor. It is a manner of emotional stress that you're going to experience. If you're going to cut the cord and you're going to leave all the amenities that you've ever known behind you for a life that you think is what you want, it may very well be. But you're going to have some rude awakenings to know that it's not the romanticized version of what you want. And that's okay. That's good. Especially if you're prepared for it. See, we did this, and we had, oh, sorry about that, guys. My camera card got full, and I had to dump the card, and now the kids are up by the cabin, so it might get a little loud. They're outside playing. But at any rate, what I was saying was, one of the things that I think most people don't take time to consider is the emotional toll that adjusting to a completely different way of life has on somebody, especially if you are moving far away from where you're at. Now, in the U.S., many places do not allow for off-grid living. There are places, absolutely, just like where we're at, we have an off-grid cabin, and it's code, it's great, that's perfect, but we do have codes to follow, but it gives us the privilege. There are some places that have no codes at all, but that is a rarity. So which is what that means, Molly, no ma'am. So which is what that means is that most people who go from living a regular on-grid life are going to move substantially far from their roots. And that alone can cause a disheaval in the emotional state of someone or someone's, being the whole family. Then if you put on top of that clearing your land by hand and building your home by hand, living in either a tent or an RV, getting used to the rustic living, the water hauling, the lack of electricity, not having the amenities that you may be used to, that's a whole lot to put on someone. And that's a whole lot to expect yourself to take and not have some adjustment issues with it. Just keeping your daily, it can take all the energy you have in the adjustment, and then when you have to put the physical work on top, or vice versa, it can take all the energy you have for the physical work, and then when you have the emotional adjustment, you can never truly prepare for this transition of life. You can have some grounding, you can have some idea, but you're never really going to know until you get into it. But it will be even more shocking if you don't have some idea from someone who has lived it. So I guess that's why I'm sharing this. Again, we've shared some of this in other videos, older videos, but we've had a few people contact us lately they're going off grid, and there's some apprehension on one party or both parties about concerns about how they're going to adjust. And instead of taking so much time to respond in an email, I thought it was just better to respond this way, to say that, if you allow yourself for some normal adjustment, if you allow yourself for some, or your spouse, if you allow your spouse some room to be emotional, to maybe be a little moody, that can help you to help them come out of it. Or if you allow yourself for that time, and what that maybe, if you're prepared for why you might be a little more emotional or a little more moody than what you normally are as a person, if you know that it could be because, wow, I do feel overloaded. I didn't realize I felt so overloaded. I didn't realize something so simple as keeping my children washed was going to be so taxing on me. I was going to feel so bad because maybe they were grubbier than I'm used to doing, or maybe my house isn't as clean. One of the hardest things for us, because you guys know we have a lot of dogs. Dogs are our family, okay? They're part of our family. They're who we are, and they're who we've always been. One thing I wasn't prepared for, you got to remember, first off, we've lived in the middle of a farm field for years. So dirt and grit in the home was not a big deal. But you know what? I had a vacuum. So vacuuming the floor, vacuuming the ceiling, vacuuming the cobwebs that would start to creep in because of the dust from the farmer. It was annoying, but it was tameable. When I came out here to the forest, and the sandy forest at that, because we're in the middle of, the Great Lake, and I had no vacuum. All I had was a broom, and it would be so overwhelming to me at times because the amount of dirt that I had to contend with, the amount of sand, and sand isn't necessarily dirt, but I refer to it as dirt because you're still sweeping it up off your floors. Yes, some of that is controllable. You can plant a ground covering, but you know what? If you haven't done this, if you have not forged your homestead out of raw land, ground covering is not your first concern. Shelter for yourself, then for your animals. That's your first concern. Producing some food off of your homestead. That's your first concern. Making sure that your family is fed when you're cooking everything from scratch. That's your first concern. Trying to keep up with the dirt, that becomes a secondary concern. Ground covering is in our future. We see it very clearly. But we had to let some time pass behind us because we were dealing with other things. Again, in our circumstance, we aren't financially independent. We had to move our business up with us, and we have to work while we do all this. So for me, it was emotionally taxing. While I tried to handle work, while I tried to handle homeschooling the children, while I tried to handle being a wife and a mother, and keep things rolling in that area as keeper of the home, things that might appear simple to someone else who lives in suburbia. This has just been a crazy video to get done. I was editing it, and I think my camera card's going. Is what the problem is. I was overlaying some audio, or it was overlaying some audio onto the wrong part of the video, and I could not clear it up. So I kind of had to jump in here and try to remember what that. I lost half of part of a clip with about 5 minutes of convo. So, but what I was saying during this part was that unless you've really lived this life, you don't really have a clue what it's like. You know, a lot of what we learn in life is definitely just through experience, and there is wisdom to share by everyone that has gone on before you. But if somebody is rich, it's like the poor little rich boy syndrome or poor little rich girl syndrome. You know, poor little rich girl has it so rough. You know, has all of daddy's money to spend, and but oh, she's so lonely. People can look at that and say, oh, you know, wish I had it so rough. But we don't know the internal loneliness, or we don't know the struggles that they're going through, and there's really struggles there. But if you're not in that situation, then you can't sympathize with it, and you really can't understand certain things. So I think it's relative to those that want to go off grid, to hear from somebody that lives off grid, that there are some emotional taxing struggles just because of the physical work, or because of the how long it takes to do almost anything. I mean, it takes forever to do things this way, and you have to be preparing yourself emotionally for that, because you're going to have enough emotional struggles as it is, even in the best of prepared situations, that if you don't have yourself somewhat set up for accepting that there's going to be some struggles with how you feel and how you're internalizing everything, it's going to be harder for you to understand that things will get better. They will become easier. It's just going to take time. Now, I have said in a previous video that, you know, with the pandemic lately and our work being dried up, we've actually been blessed because we've had some time to dedicate to our home, which we haven't had. And I'm excited because some of the things that I've seen, the things that we gave up, you know, we sold off all of our furniture. Well, we sold off a large portion of our furniture anyways down south before we moved up here. And we had bits and pieces of furniture. And for me, being a homemaker, that was difficult because I'm living in a home that, you know, it's not done on the interior, and our furniture isn't cute and comfortable and homey, I guess, you know. And that's part of being a homemaker. That's part of you want your family to feel at home and at ease. But we've been able to, the past few months, focus on that, and we haven't really had any money to put into it, but we're you know, got some paint, and we worked on the furniture we had, and have dealt with the things that we've already possessed, but have the time and the energy and the creativity put into it. So I'm excited for that, because my life is just getting easier from where it's been. We put a stock tank. I'm going to show this. I said we were going to do a couple videos ago. I said we were going to do a new cabin tour, and we will. But this cabin behind me holds a stock tank, and it holds 100 gallons of water. And Ron is putting in our old pitcher pump that we had at our dry sink, so I'll have running water in the cabin. And yeah, we still have to haul the 100 gallons of water in, but you know what? I got 100 gallons inside. that I normally don't have, or I have to deal with, 25 gallons of containers sitting around, which drives me absolutely crazy. So I'm finally feeling some fluidity and some peace in that area. And I think that's the biggest thing right there, is we lose a sense of peace when we uproot so severely. In our country, in our world, in our society, uprooting like that hasn't really happened so severely for a century. When we uproot now, we move from one modern home to another. Maybe not as nice, but it's still a modern home. It still has running water and electricity, and you can still, expose yourself to all the modern things you're used to. But when you're building, when you move to a homestead completely to scratch, it is a whole whirlwind of adjustment, and you need to be prepared for that, because if you're prepared, to be forewarned is to be forearmed, the old saying goes. And if I'd have had somebody to help me understand that, I would have had a lot less difficult days and would have had a lot less difficult moments that I put my poor husband through, although he understood and he was prepared to, and he had his own moments. But the whole thing for this is to give your family more. Not more material things, but more joy and more happiness and more peace. And if you're prepared to deal with those little things that add up so intently, then you are prepared or able to give your family that joy for the whole point that you've moved to such a different lifestyle. And that's what I want to share with you. So that is why I'm sharing this video. And that's why I'm saying, if you're doing it, be prepared. Hang in there. Don't give up. Know that it doesn't happen overnight. Joy comes with time. And if we keep our mind, the Bible says, He will keep us in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on me. And so if you're a Christian, I want to encourage you, if you're in this situation, keep your mind on Christ, because you will gain peace and eventually, okay? And you'll grow. You'll grow. I feel I have grown a lot. Like I said, we live differently to begin with. But so I guess that's the whole thing. If we live differently, if we lived outside of society's norm, if we had very little electricity, and sorry, Daisy's back here watching the kids outside. She wants to go out so badly with them. Daisy, it's enough. If we lived so outside of the norm of modern conveniences, and I still had such a hard time adjusting to this lifestyle. And when I say that, keep in mind, it's more of an emotional thing. I could do the physical work. It was the emotional, being able to see it at the end, knowing that it was going to change. Then I can only imagine how difficult it could be for somebody who completely lives a modern life and then tries to make that adjustment. So I hope this is helpful for someone. I really am, or really do. We try to be pretty open. We're private people, but we do try to be honest about the experiences we felt and feel and things we've learned. We've said more than once, this is not a life to be romanticized. This is a life of hard work, and it takes time to get established. It takes time to be prosperous, and that's why people were willing at one time to all but die for their land, because they worked. That land owned them over time, and that land was part of them. It became their sweat and blood, and it wasn't a joyride. It was something that really took part of their soul. And I think that's to a point that's biblical. This land, in the end, this land doesn't possess us, we possess it. But no matter, you have to live somewhere, and if you give your time and your efforts to it, it does have part of you sunk into it. So know that it can be done, but just expect to experience an emotional roller coaster at times, and be prepared for it. If you're prepared, you're forewarned, then you're forearmed. All right, so that's it. Hope you guys have a great day, and we will talk to you very soon. God bless.